Welcome everyone to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 31 of the 2022 podcast series, also known as the second episode of the post-draft edition. Now, the Ready for the Draft podcast, normally we're getting you ready for the NFL draft by taking a look at the draft eligible prospects, but in this case, we're actually doing a draft recap. That's right, taking a look at all 32 teams, going pick by pick, and really taking a look at the value of each of those picks as well as the fit. And so episode 1 of the post-draft edition, we took a look at my two favorite drafts, and that was the Baltimore Ravens, obviously getting Kyle Hamilton there, best player available there at 14, then trading back into round number 1, getting Tyler Linderbaum. The Jets, not only do you get the number 1 corner, the number 1 or number 2 wideout, depending on who you talk to, and you trade back into the first round because you also needed a pass rusher. Jermaine Johnson happened to fall to them at 26. Excellent draft there. They also get the number 1 running back and a top 5 tight end when it was all said and done. So those were my two favorite drafts. We also started alphabetically from there with the rest of the team. So we started with the Arizona Cardinals, went through the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this podcast, we're actually going to take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs, all the way through to the Washington Commanders, and then episode 3 of the post-draft edition, we'll actually be taking a look position by position on how the draft really played out, and we'll even take a look at the undrafted free agents at each of those positions, the guys that I think could make an NFL roster and make an impact at the next level. And then finally, at the end of that episode, we'll sprinkle in a brief look into the 2023 draft. That's right, the guys that you need to be paying attention to during the 2022 college football season. Obviously, we're going to have the 2023 NFL draft series that'll start. It'll come out probably in August, and we'll go ahead and kick things off and really start talking about the 2023 draft in August of this year. So there's a lot to cover. We have 16 teams to cover here in the next hour or so. So we're going to jump right into things and take a look at Kansas City and what the Chiefs did. And if the Ravens and the Jets were my two favorite, number 3 had to be the Kansas City Chiefs, especially with what they did with their first 5 picks. Now, Trent McDuffie, I was not expecting him to be on the board. I actually had them go corner and then defensive end, but ultimately I had them going Andrew Booth at 29 and Boye Mafe at number 30. Not expecting Trent McDuffie to be there at 21 overall when they traded up with the New England Patriots to get McDuffie, but I'm telling you, if this guy were a couple of inches taller, we'd be looking at a guy who was in that conversation for a potential top 10 pick. Pretty clean in terms of the tape, very sticky in terms of that corner. He likes to be aggressive, gets his hands on you. He can be a press man guy, can play in off coverage, can play inside and outside, likely to be the nickel there in this defense. They already have L'Jarius Sneed. They also have Rashad Fenton, so I think he really fits well as that nickel. But a guy who's fearless. He's going to come up and help in run support. He's going to stick his nose in, coming downhill whenever possible. So love that pick to Kansas City. Then they go defensive end, as I mentioned, and they get the big Greek physical specimen there in George Karlaftis, a guy who, he played water polo as a kid, was on the Greek national team at one point, but I'll tell you, a lot of people have kind of been down on George Karlaftis, saying, well, he's got the shorter arms, he's not all that explosive, can't really bend. I think he's a much better athlete than people give him credit for. And yes, I know he didn't live up to that freshman season where he had the 7 sacks and double-digit tackles for loss, but I thought, you see the power in his hands. He made a lot of plays in the backfield, a guy who I think can get to the quarterback coming off the edge. And when you look at the Chiefs, they really got the juice that they needed in a pass rusher when Melvin Ingram joined the team. And that's really what I was looking for, was who are they going to bring in that can help provide that juice? Because you have Frank Clark on one end, and you have one of the most dynamic defensive tackles in the middle of your defense in Chris Jones. So who are you going to bring in? Getting George Karlaftis there to be able to work with Frank coming off the edge. I think you'll see a lot of single team matchups there, one-on-one, and he's going to use those heavy hands of his to get after the quarterback. I think he'll be a day 1 starter for sure. Then in round 2, You knew that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to look receiver. I didn't think they were going to go round 1, but round 2 made a lot of sense to me. And obviously Tyreek Hill's in Miami, so you're looking at Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster teaming up with Mecole Hardman, but you needed another guy to really move that needle. And I'm looking at Sky Moore. Wow, what a pick. The 22nd pick in round number 2. And when you watch Sky Moore play, he's just so smooth and fluid as a route runner. You forget that this dude also ran a 4.41 140 at the combine. He always looked to be more sudden and quicker than fast with the route running ability. But look, 95 catches, 1,292 yards, and 10 touchdowns this past season. Love that pick. Patrick Mahomes has a new favorite target along with Travis Kelce there. And then staying in round number 2, they get Brian Cook, the safety out of Cincinnati, a guy who, had 96 tackles. The versatility is really what stands out. Not only does he have that, he had 9 pass breakups. He can play over the top. He can play in the box. When you look at the safety position, they needed to get another safety in this group. You have Juan Thornhill, but Tyrann Mathieu gone, Daniel Sorensen, Armani Watts also gone. You bring in Justin Reed, but you need that third corner. I don't think Deon Bush necessarily moves the needle enough, so you get Brian Cook in there to really solidify that unit. I really like that pickup as well. And then getting into round number 3, their last pick on day 2, the 39th pick in round number 3, and they get Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin. This dude is a guy, he was a volume tackler for Wisconsin, but also a guy that was making a lot of plays in the backfield, 8.5 sacks to go along with, I believe, 18 tackles for loss. When you look at this linebacking group, they've got Willie Gay, they've got Nick Bolton, guys that like to fly around to the football. Leo Chenal is another guy that's going to be able to do that. I see Leo Chenal at that strong side backer spot, ultimately taking over a starting spot from Jermaine Carter. Obviously, they like to use that nickel a lot, so you'll see a lot of the 2 linebacker sets, but I think you can have that rotation there with Willie Gay, Nick Bolton, and Leo Chenal. Really like that pick there. Day 3, you really saw an emphasis on the secondary. This is, I think, a play there by the GM, Brett Beach, really wanting to focus on that secondary. So what do? They get a big corner in Joshua Williams out of Fayetteville State. Long guy, 6'3", 195 pounds, stiff in his hips a little bit, so you kind of worry about that, but a guy that's going to be able to play out on the outside there. Battle DeAndre Baker, Lonnie Johnson, who they got from Houston, for that next cornerback spot. What do they then do? They look at the guard spot. And I think what this draft told me when I'm looking at the guard position, a lot of these guys that were tackles that project to be guards at the next level, they didn't, that their draft stock was not very high. I had Darian Kennard as a guy that could have been a second, possibly third round pick. He looks to me like a lot like Cody Ford, so a tackle, but really belongs as a guard. And when you look at this offensive line, obviously you've got Orlando Brown, Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. You're really set there. So then you have Darian Kennard, who's probably going to battle Andrew Wiley, Lucas Niang for that right tackle spot, but also provides a lot of depth as well. Because I think he'll be able to spot Thuney and Smith at the guard positions as well. So really nice value there in round number 5, the second pick of the 5th round. And then 3 picks in round number 7. They get another bigger corner in Jalen Watson, 6'2", 197 pounds. A guy who probably could see some time at safety when it's all said and done, but a guy that I think is going to push for some playing time. Isaiah Pacheco, the 30th pick in round number 7 out of Rutgers. This guy, look, he was battling behind an offensive line that was pretty porous there for the Scarlet Knights. Ran just 3.9 yards per carry. But look, that speed is really what jumps out at you, and you need a third back to run with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Ronald Jones II, who they brought in from Tampa, and I think Pacheco has a good chance to really stick with this roster. Ran that 4.37 40 at the combine, so like that value late in round number 7. And then you look at Nazeeh Johnson out of Marshall. Another safety, a guy that has pretty good range. He can play nickel, free safety, corner a little bit. 6'2", 189 pounds. He's tall, he's long, he's lean. So another guy who's probably going to need to show up on special teams to really solidify a roster spot. Which takes us to the LA Chargers. And, when you look at KC, they really focused on the secondary. Why? Because you have Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, and hey, guess what? Now you have Russell Wilson added to the AFC West. I mean, this is just really murderer's row. And when you look at what the Chargers did, on day 3, they actually took 2 corners in Jasir Taylor out of Wake Forest, Dean Leonard out of Ole Miss. Jasir Taylor, a veteran corner, 58 games, played for the Demon Deacons. He's a little on the smaller side, but excellent ball skills. And then Dean Leonard was a guy that I thought really emerged this past season. A 6-foot corner, really good speed, decent ball skills, but failed to intercept the pass in his 2 seasons there at Ole Miss. So he's a guy that's really going to have to battle to make a roster spot, because when you look at that cornerback position for the Chargers, you already have J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel, and Michael Davis. So you're looking, I think Jasir Taylor can get into that conversation as that 4th corner, and I think Dean Leonard's really going to have to show that he has the ball skills required to take that on. Moving back to the first round and that 17th overall pick, I'll tell you, I was expecting them to look Trevor Penning. And Trevor Penning actually was on the board when the Chargers were drafting, because Storm Norton, man, he got beat up. The sacks, the penalties, it just really started adding up on that right side. Just really struggled. And so you're expecting them to take Trevor Penning, but they also need a guard. They have Matt Filer there at 1 guard spot, but hey, you know what? They need another guard. And so that's really where Zion Johnson actually made a lot of sense. And I don't know why I didn't really look in that direction as I was putting together my mock draft, but it makes a lot of sense. Zion Johnson could be a day 1 starter at right guard, because you got Filer at left guard, Rashawn Slater, obviously the all-pro left tackle, Corey Linsley at center. Zion Johnson gives you 5 position versatility, can play any of the positions on the line. I wouldn't rule out Zion Johnson taking over for Storm Norton at right tackle if things get ugly. Another guy that they took in round number 6 is Jamari Sawyer, another one of those guys who played tackle in college but projects inside at guard. I'll tell you what, with Jamari Sawyer, what's interesting about him, he's 6'3", 321 pounds. He looks like a guard. You just look at his body type, but I thought that the movement skills, especially what he showed against Aiden Hutchinson and Will Anderson down the stretch, this was a guy who actually showed some pretty good foot speed. Surprisingly good foot speed for a guy that really projects inside a guard. So he's another guy that's going to give you that versatility. I think when you're talking about the Chargers, at the end of the day, I think they're going to be putting in their top 5 offensive lineman. Zion Johnson, just really a heady player, very intelligent, instinctive football player, high football IQ. So I think at the end of the day, what you're going to see is Slater, Filer, Linsley, Johnson, and Sawyer in some variety there. That's going to be what's going to be interesting, is exactly how that's going to be playing out in LA. Round number 5, you get Otito Ogbonnaya out of UCLA, a big defensive tackle. This dude's huge, 6'4", 324 pounds. He's physical at the point of attack, heavy-handed, very physical at the point of attack. And look, this is the team that was worst against the run. You already brought in Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day in free agency. I think Ogbonnaya has a really good chance to get in and make some noise and challenge for a starting spot early. Jerry Tillery's been an underwhelming first-round pick coming out of Notre Dame. So I think Ogbonnaya battling these guys up front, there's a good chance that we'll see him at some point taking over that nose tackle position. The last pick there in round number 7 for the Chargers, was Xander Horvath. And Xander Horvath, played at Purdue, and this guy was a really hard-nosed runner. The problem was he just couldn't stay healthy and couldn't stay on the field for the Boilermakers. 6'3", 230 pounds, over 1,000 yards rushing, 62 receptions in his 4 years at Purdue. But the concern is really his health. But I think ultimately, if he can stay healthy, I think he will supplant Gabe Neighbors there at that fullback position. I did skip a couple of guys there. In round number 3, JT Woods, the safety out of Baylor. And when you look at the safety position, you have Nasir Adderley, you have Derwin James, but again, we were talking about the quarterbacks in the AFC West. Obviously, there's also Patrick Mahomes. And when you look at this group, and you're talking about that safety position, you're going to need that third safety. And with JT Woods, what you have is another real long, lean guy. He's 6'2", 195 pounds, a guy that's has pretty good ball skills. I think that's one of the things that kind of jumped out. He does a really good tracking the ball, plays well over the top. 9 interceptions since the start of 2020. Provides really good depth on the back end. I thought it was a little early for him, but at the same time, this was a guy, especially down the stretch for Baylor, making a lot of plays on the football. So I think that was a decent pickup. Plus, a guy that tall shows up at the combine, ends up running a 4.36 40, 39.5-inch vertical leap. So the explosiveness is absolutely there for JT Woods. And then they get a running back in round number 4 in Isaiah Spiller, a guy who I thought had a chance to even be a second-round pick. When you look at Austin Eckler, Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree, what you didn't have was that physicality, a physical back who could run between the tackles. Isaiah Spiller is a guy that's able to do that. Not great top-end speed, but really tough, especially between the tackles. He can make you miss in the hole, has a decent burst coming off the line as well. Decent receiver, natural pass catcher with his hands. So a guy who I think is going to end up backing up Austin Eckler there in LA when it's all said and done. You move on to the Las Vegas Raiders, and again, we're staying in the AFC West. And when you look at the Las Vegas Raiders, obviously we know that they didn't have any picks in the first 2 rounds of the draft, largely because of the Davante Adams trade. When you get a guy like Davante Adams who moves the needle, look, you're willing to go ahead and give up a couple of those draft picks, right? And so when you look at the Raiders and you look at what they did, in round number 3, the 26th pick in the 3rd round, they take Dylan Parham, a guard/center. When you look at this offensive line, you have Jermaine Elumunor, and you have Denzel Good at the guard position, along with John Simpson and Alex Bars. I think when you look at that depth, these are guys that I think Parham could come in and battle them for a starting spot, but I really think what Parham is going to be there for is targeting that pivot, taking over that center spot from Andre James. I think that's ultimately where Dylan Parham is going to fit in for the Raiders. Round number 4 was kind of a curious pick. They took Zamir White, the running back there, out of Georgia. I think ultimately what they're looking at is a lot of expiring contracts in this running back group, but you have Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, Brandon Bolden. I know that they didn't take the option for Josh Jacobs, so that is something that they could be considering, and looking at Zamir White potentially taking this over. But I was expecting to see them really target that linebacker position. I know that they brought in Jayon Brown to team with Denzel Perryman, but I really wanted to see them attack that linebacker position, and we just didn't see that. We did see the pass rush, obviously, with Chandler Jones coming in. That was huge. They also brought in Kyler Fackrell as well, coming off the edge. That really gives them some explosiveness to team with Max Crosby, especially because Cleveland Ferrell has been a bust to this point. But Zamir White, I think you're going to get a guy who has, he's good, good physicality, 6 foot, 214 pounds. He's pretty elusive. Can make you miss in the hole, pretty shifty, but not a ton of speed. Coming out of the backfield, wasn't really used as the pass catcher there at Georgia. It was more so James Cook. Day 3, it continues with Neil Farrell out of LSU, the big nose tackle, 6'4", 330 pounds. And I think when you look at this, Jonathan Hankins was re-signed, but I think you're really looking at the future. I think Farrell can come in, ultimately battle Andrew Billings for a starting spot. In round 5, I really like this pick. Excellent value, getting a guy like Matthew Butler, a guy who I think can be an interior pass rusher for them. When you look at their 34 defense, I think that Matthew Butler is going to be a nice rotational piece with Bilal Nichols, and Vernon Butler has a chance to end up starting when it's all said and done. I think he has enough length to be a 34 D end. I think he has really good hands. Excellent body control as well. So that's a nice pick there. Excellent value. Round 7, Thayer Munford. Here's another guy who played both tackle and guard. Projects inside to guard. Really long arms. He's 6'6". And when you look at Mumford, not only is he 6'6" and 328 pounds, but 35 and 1/8 inch arms. Ran a 5.39 40, so he's a bit of a guy, heavy-footed dude, but he's a wide-bodied guy. Really, when he moved inside to guard, that really looks to be his home. So he's a depth piece there. And then round 7, they draft Britton Brown out of UCLA. This was kind of a curious pick for me. I thought there were some other running backs that were out there that they could have targeted. We'll be talking about them as we look at the undrafted free agents. Britton Brown really wasn't the best running back even on the roster there at UCLA. It was Zach Charbonnet, who we'll be talking about for next year's draft. So he's a guy that I think with that loaded backfield. Amir Abdullah, by the way, is also in that backfield. So a lot of heads there. Britton Brown's really going to have to work hard to even make the practice squad. So then we move on to the Miami Dolphins. And again, here's a team with very few draft picks, and that's because of the Tyreek Hill trade. So again, you move on from the Raiders to Miami, making huge deals for that receiver. And I mean, when you got Tyreek Hill, you also have Jalen Waddle, and you have Cedric Wilson, who you picked up from Dallas. You're not going to need a receiver. You're not going to draft a receiver, right? Wrong. Round number 4, the 20th pick in round 4, they use it on Eric Azukama, 6'2", 209, a guy who really grew into his frame. A guy that I think is a good downfield threat, excellent body control on those 50-50 balls and the back shoulder throws. So he gives you, a bigger receiver, bigger target, a guy that I think, could end up taking that roster spot away from Preston Williams, because these guys are similar players. But their first pick in the draft was late on day 2 in the 3rd round there, and they take Channing Tindall, the 6'2", 230-pound linebacker out of Georgia. And look, the Dolphins, they struggled against the run. They struggled mightily against the run. So when you're looking at Channing Tindall, I think he's going to compete with Landon Roberts and Jerome Baker for a starting spot there at inside linebacker. They have Sam McGuavin, they have Duke Riley, but what you're getting with Channing Tindall is excellent speed, sideline to sideline, a guy who can also get after the quarterback. And when you look at Channing Tindall and you look at his production, I think that's one of the things that really speaks to me when I'm trying to evaluate him as a potential draft pick at the next level. Channing Tindall could be a much better pro than he was in college, especially in terms of his productivity, because this was a guy in 2021, and he wasn't a starter. 67 tackles, 7.5 going for loss, and 5.5 sacks. A guy who has that speed to be able to fly around to the football. I really like that pick. That's great value in round number 3. Round 7, they get another guy who can get after the quarterback, and Cameron Good out of Cal. And this was a guy, look, he's just a couple of years removed from just a dynamic season for the Golden Bears. Good is a guy who can get after the quarterback. He's 6'2", 240 pounds. And I mentioned that season that he had in 2019. This was a guy, look, 14 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks. Also a guy, he has 9 pass breakups in his career, really just battling some injuries. So, if he can stay healthy, this is a guy that I think can provide some good depth at that pass rushing position, because you're looking at Jalen Phillips, who needs to really take that next step forward. You have Andrew Van Ginkel as well. But I think, Cameron Good, battling Brendan Scarlett, battling Darius Hodge for that backup role. I think he'll be a nice rotational piece. Then Skylar Thompson, the quarterback in round number 7. And this is the thing that's really weird. You look at the quarterback's position, and the guys who aren't the most athletic, but very cerebral, those are the guys that are going to get selected. But you've got the linebacker position, guys that need to fly around. You're seeing guys that are drafted more so on potential at that linebacker spot versus guys who are instinctive, high football IQ. They're just not the best athlete. So it's just kind of interesting. You look at the different dynamic there based on the different positions. Skylar Thompson, a guy who I think can make some plays outside the pocket, doesn't have the best arm. I don't look at him as a tremendous athlete by any means. 6'2", 217 pounds. This is going to be a guy, when you look at Tua, you got Teddy Bridgewater. Skylar is probably going to end up being your number 3 quarterback. But hey, in round number 7, you're bound to take a quarterback late. So not a bad value when it's all said and done. You're going to get a guy who I think is an intelligent quarterback, but I don't know that he'll be on the roster more than a couple of years. Minnesota, look, I thought Minnesota had a great draft. I like what they did with a lot of their picks. They trade back. I thought that there was a chance that maybe they could end up targeting Jordan Davis, possibly. But ultimately they trade out of that 12 spot. They get all the way down to 32. Detroit Lions end up taking Jameson Williams. So Minnesota at 32 overall. I thought they were going to target a corner and a safety at some point. And I wasn't expecting to see Andrew Booth on the board in round number 2. But in round 1, they end up taking Lewis Seen out of Georgia, the free safety. He's going to be playing right next to Harrison Smith. I like this pick. This is a guy that's going to fly around to the football. I think he'll complement Harrison Smith very well. I mentioned round 2, Andrew Booth Jr. This guy, he plays the cornerback position like a receiver. I love the body control, the ball skills. A guy who battled some injuries, and so I think that's why he may have fallen out of round number 1. But I think this is a guy who's going to battle Cam Dantzler for a starting spot right away. You have Patrick Peterson on the roster. I think the depth is there now at that cornerback position, and I think the future is going to be bright for Dantzler and Booth. They also end up taking a Caleb Evans out of Missouri in round number 4, a physical corner. He's 6'2", very long, and I remember when he played at Tulsa before he transferred to Mizzou, taking on the likes of Tylan Wallace. What he loved to do, he and both Allie Green IV, who's still there at Mizzou, they love to jam him and drive him all the way to the sideline. Really got physical. I think that's one of the things you're going to see out of a Caleb Evans. Round number 2, their second pick in round 2, 27 overall, they take Ed Ingram out of LSU. I was kind of surprised that they ended up going Ed Ingram because they had some other guys that were valued ahead of him. However, this is a guy who's going to be a road grader. It's going to be nice for Dalvin Cook, especially because when he gets out and pulls, it's like a bowling ball, rolling down the alley. He's just going to light people up. And so when you already have Darisaw and O'Neal at the tackle positions, you've got Cleveland and Bradbury there on the interior. Ed Ingram's going to give you some physicality, some much needed physicality. A lot of guys that I think are very athletic, more finesse type players. Ed Ingram's going to get some nastiness to that offensive line, much needed. Round number 3, one of the best values I think is Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma. They brought in Jordan Hicks to team up with Eric Kendricks. I think Eric Kendricks is starting to show his age a little bit, and so he's a guy that I think Brian Asamoah is going to end up taking over that starting spot for Eric Kendricks in a couple of years. 6 foot, 226 pounds. Yes, he's undersized, but man, he flies around to the football, does an excellent job slipping blocks, can play sideline to sideline, explosive, excels dropping into coverage as well. Really a great value, a guy that I thought could come off the board in round 2. Second pick in round number 3, Minnesota. Excellent job there. Round 5, they take Esezi Atomewo out of Minnesota. They needed to address the line up front. You've got Harrison Phillips, Dalvin Tomlinson, and likely Armon Watts as your starters, but you need depth pieces there. I think Esezi's going to end up battling Jalen Twyman for that backup spot there to Harrison Phillips at the end position. And then you get Ty Chandler there in round number 5. At the running back position out of North Carolina, 5'11", 204. He's explosive. A guy who I thought was just an average running back at Tennessee, shows up at North Carolina, goes over 1,000 yards, able to showcase more of that speed. And so I look at the pick. It's a little curious to me because you've got Dalvin Cook, you have Alexander Madison, you have Kenny Nwangwu. So I just don't know where he fits into the plan. That was kind of a bit of a head scratcher for me, especially in round number 5. I thought they could address that line again, potentially another pass rusher to team up with Zadarius Smith and Daniil Hunter. Then you get to round number 6, and you have Vidarian Lowe out of Illinois. A guy, they stay in Big Ten country, 6'5", 314 pounds. He's big, got long arms, but not really overwhelming when you watch his tape. A guy who I think is going to end up having to battle Blake Brandel and Oli Udo for a backup spot, but I think that's really where there isn't a ton of depth at the tackle position. So I think there's a chance that Vidarian Lowe could end up finding a spot on the roster. With Lowe, again, 6'5", 314, but really long arms, 35 and 3/8-inch arms, and these giant hands, 10 and 3/8-inch hands. So a dude, once he gets a hold of you, he's not letting go. Round number 6, I thought this was really good value, getting Jalen Naylor, 1,000-yard receiver. You're looking at out of Michigan State, shifty, explosive, a vertical threat. You've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Olabisi Johnson, Amir Smith-Marset. I think when you look at Jalen Naylor, he and Smith-Marset are going to kind of battle to be that vertical threat. If you're going to take 6 wideouts, I think Naylor has a chance to make this roster. And then round 7, this was kind of a curious pick. They ended up taking Nick Muse out of South Carolina, a guy who showed promise as a receiver. Look, he's 6'5", 249 pounds, good hands, decent speed, but the problem with him was just really the lack of consistency at that position. So that was one of the things that I thought was really frustrating, was you're expecting to see a little bit more out of him. And really at that tight end position, Jalen Weidermeyer was out there, Derek Deese Jr., and a couple of other guys, even Chase Allen, Garrett Prince out of UAB. So some other guys that I probably would have targeted at that position before I would have taken Nick Muse. But look, that's okay. I really like what Minnesota did on the first part of that draft, which takes us to the New England Patriots. And look, this was probably some of the biggest head scratchers of the 3 days of the draft, and it really started there with the 29th overall pick. You trade down, and you ended up taking Cole Strange, a guard out of Chattanooga, who I think everyone was expecting to still be on the board in round number 2. A guy, look, he's a throwback, he's a nasty dude, and physical at the point of attack, a guy that can play both guard and center. And so I think Bill Belichick looking to immediately upgrade that guard position, a guy who can come in and replace Shaq Mason, but I think is also long-term can end up replacing David Andrews there at that center spot. So it gives him some versatility there at the position, but again, could have been taken in round number 2. And then in round 2, you target a receiver. And look, I was expecting them to do that. Get a vertical threat. You got Jacoby Myers and Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar. None of these guys are really going to take the top off of a defense, really scare you getting vertical. And so you get really the fastest guy at the combine at the receiver position in Tyquan Thornton, who ran a 4.28 40 at 6'2 and 181 pounds. I know at Baylor he had 62 receptions, 948 yards, and 10 touchdowns for the Baylor Bears. But look, this was the guy who I was expecting to still be there on day number 3. And when you look at that wide receiver position, there were a lot of other guys that were on the board that you would have expected to come off the board sooner. So I know that they were targeting the speed, and that's really, I think, what they were looking for. But look, you've got George Pickens, who came off the board just 2 picks later. Right after that was Alex Pierce. And when you're talking about Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, Alec Pierce ran a 4.41 40 at 6'3 and 211 pounds, and very explosive 40.5-inch vertical leap, and was more of a proven commodity there at Cincinnati. Same goes for Sky Moore. We've already talked about him. All those guys came off the board right after Tyquan Thornton. So really a shocker that they went Tyquan Thornton there, a guy, like I said, I think everyone was expecting to still be there on day number 3. And it kind of is reminiscent of that 2020 draft, right, with the New England Patriots. If I take you back there, that's when they drafted both Anthony Jennings and Josh Uche at that outside linebacker position to give them some additional explosiveness and pass rush. Those guys so far have combined for just 4 sacks. Anthony Jennings didn't play at all in 2021. They also doubled up at the tight end position, looking to try to capture lightning in a bottle again with getting those 2 tight ends to mirror what they had with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. They end up bringing in Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene, a couple of guys who really haven't made much of an impact at all in New England. So really, again, another round of just curious picks on the front end of the draft. Those tight ends ultimately, because they didn't pan out, resulted in Bill Belichick, last offseason targeting Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. So it's interesting to see how this is going to play out. Can we get some additional, some more explosiveness there on the front end of that draft? Round number 3, they get, I think, a great pick in Marcus Jones out of Houston, a guy who really put everything together as a senior at Houston. He played initially at Troy, ended up transferring to the Houston Cougars, and I think Marcus Jones is known for his kick return and punt return ability. 9 kicks that he's returned, 4 touchdowns, but at corner, 5 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. So this is a guy who I think, again, great pick. You got Jonathan Jones, who's starting to get up there in age at that nickel spot. I think Marcus Jones will ultimately take over that starting spot when it's all said and done. Round 4, I thought there was a big reach for Jack Jones out of Arizona State. If you'll remember, this was a guy who actually went to USC and basically deemed himself the Heisman Trophy winner. He was going to win the Heisman Trophy coming out of Long Beach Poly, and there was all this big hoopla, and there was the video that he released on social media when he announced everything. So obviously a big surprise there. Did have 4 interceptions there with the Trojans, so that was something that I think really kind of ignited things for his career starting out, but this is a guy who he's a gambler. He takes a lot of chances, gets his eyes into the backfield, gets lost a lot. Did end up with 10 interceptions in his career, 26 total pass breakups. So the ball skills, I think, something that jumps out. They needed a corner. And when you have Malcolm Butler and Jalen Mills, Terrence Mitchell, they needed to get another corner in there to replace J.C. Jackson. And again, I thought there were other corners out there that they could have targeted before Jack Jones, a guy that I really had coming off the board later on day 3. I wasn't as high on him as some other people. But I love their pick, their second pick in round number 4, the 22nd pick to start off day number 3. And it's Pierre Strong out of South Dakota State. This was an explosive guy, well over 1,000 yards on the year. You've got these bigger physical guys in Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. And what Pierre Strong has given you is some of that versatility. A guy who can be a weapon coming out of the backfield as a receiver. He's 5'11", 207. When you saw him in the East-West Shrine Bowl, you saw the speed, the explosiveness, the acceleration. Ran a 4.37 40 at the combine, so that really checks the box. A guy who I think can be dynamic and could potentially be a steal for them. A guy who I think is going to take over that receiver spot from James White for the Patriots. Round 4, they ended up taking Bailey Zappi out of Western Kentucky. And look, I think there's kind of that trend. You've got Mac Jones, you've got Brian Hoyer, now Bailey Zappi, guys who have good but not great arms, very intelligent quarterbacks, not the best athletes in the world, but I think this is a guy who will end up taking over for Brian Hoyer as the backup for Mac Jones. Round 5, they take Kevin Harris, a running back. He reminds me so much of Ramondre Stevenson because of the fact that he's a guy that is he runs between the tackles. He's 5'10", 221 pounds, led the SEC in rushing. Then he has offseason back surgery, and then 2021 really couldn't get things going. Very instinctive inside runner, but he's so much like Ramondre Stevenson. I thought it was kind of a curious pick. Doubling up at the running back position, it just seemed a little odd to me. Round 6, they get Sam Roberts out of Northwest Missouri State, 6'5", 292. This dude, 18 tackles for loss and 18 tackles for loss last year, 47 in his career. And a guy that, look, when you look at this line, they've got Dietrich Wise, Lawrence Guy, Henry Anderson. I think Sam Roberts is the guy that can end up moving into this rotation. That could be a sneaky good pick there with a 22nd pick in round number 6. 10 picks later, they get Jason Hines out of LSU, a guard. Again, you already took Cole Strange. I think this is a pick that basically tells you that I think Cole Strange will ultimately kick inside to that center spot and take over for David Andrews. Then they get Andrew Stuber out of Michigan there in round number 7, 6'7", 325 pounds. He's big, he's physical. He could play guard, but I think he'll be that backup for Trent Brown at that right tackle position when it's all said and done. So doubled up yet again on corners, running backs, and guards. I hope that this draft pans out a lot better for the Patriots than what we saw there in the 2020 draft. Which takes us to New Orleans. And I'll tell you what, New Orleans, at one point I actually had both Chris Olave and Trevor Penning mocked to them in round number 1. Ultimately, I thought that Penning was going to be their target with their first pick, so I ended up having Olave come off the board to the Chargers there at 17. But when you have with Olave, what was interesting was they traded up once with Philly. And they ended up giving up a first-round pick. Then they trade up again to the number 11 overall selection to then ultimately take Chris Olave. So, a lot of draft capital given up. So they're thinking really highly of Chris Olave, 6 foot, 187 pounds. The guy, look, he's explosive, he's dynamic, ran that unofficial 4.26 that rounded up being a 4.39 40 at the combine. A vertical threat, a guy that, those routes he's able to separate vertically. I think could be a nice compliment to Michael Thomas. I thought this was a great fit for them, so I'm not upset with the pick. I was just more disappointed with just how much they gave up to get him. But again, Jameis Winston's going to have a nice weapon there on the outside, a vertical threat that'll team nicely with Michael Thomas. Then you get Trevor Penning. They're at 19. And look, they still ended up getting their offensive tackle. And what you get with Penning is the big physical dude who's going to throw people all over the yard. I think Alvin Kamara is going to love running behind this guy. 6'7", 325. The big issue for him is getting that pad level a little bit lower. He needs to clean up the hand usage and the footwork. But when you look at that left tackle position, Teron Armstead's in Miami now. They needed that left tackle. They weren't going to get one of the top 3 tackles in the draft. So ultimately, they end up getting Trevor Penning there. Makes a lot of sense. Round 2, they get Alontae Taylor, a corner/safety, an explosive guy. I think that's one of the things that you definitely saw at the Combine. Ran that 4.36 40 at 6 foot and 199 pounds. A guy who has good ball skills. A guy I think could play safety at the next level. Especially with Marcus Williams being signed away. They did bring in Marcus May to take over that spot. They also brought in Tyrann Mathieu and Daniel Sorensen. So I think Taylor gives you some positional versatility. He could play safety, but I think at that cornerback position, you've got Paulson Adebo, you've got Marshawn Lattimore, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's likely going to be your nickel. So I think Alontae Taylor kind of fits in with P.J. Williams as kind of that number 4 corner, basically that number 3 corner on the outside. I thought that was a little early for him as well, expecting him to really come off the board in the 3rd round. Round 5, I really like this pick. I think DeMarco Jackson is going to be a guy that's going to end up taking over for Demario Davis when it's all said and done. 6'1", 233 pounds, flew around to the football. Look, this dude had 120 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 6 passes defended, just flies around to the football, very instinctive, plays pretty well as an open field tackler, sideline to sideline ability, can get after the quarterback, can drop into coverage. I just like the pick. And I think he'll fit in very well as an eventual replacement, like I said, for Davis. And then round 6, they end up getting Jordan Jackson out of Air Force, another guy who I think could get, put some pressure on the quarterback. When you're looking at Alontae Taylor there in round number 2, the reason why I was a little bit surprised with that selection was I was actually expecting them to go with a defensive tackle. When you look at that tackle position in New Orleans, Daniel Onyemata, Shai Suttle, Kentavious Street, Malcolm Roach, just doesn't strike fear in opposing offenses. I think they really needed to go after a guy like Perion Winfrey. That was what I was kind of expecting them to do. We didn't see them do that. They end up getting Jordan Jackson there in round number 6. They had to get at least one defensive tackle, so they do target him. And look, this is a guy who can get after the quarterback. He's 6'5", 294 pounds, and put together a nice career there with the Falcons. 27 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks. Can be a guy, I think he needs to put on a little bit more weight. But a guy that I think could end up being a presence there at the defensive tackle position as an interior pass rusher. That's going to end up giving Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport some assistance there. But again, would have liked to have seen them target a guy like Perion Winfrey. So we'll see how this draft plays out in the next couple of years for the Saints. The Giants, look, I thought they hit a home run in round 1. There were some questionable picks after that, so I don't have them slated in my top 2 or 3. But again, I love their first 2 picks because, look, they took Kayvon Thibodeau at 5 and Evan Neal at 7. So not only did they target both of their key needs at the top of the draft, but they also got 2 guys who, going into the pre-draft process, everyone was talking about as potentially the top 2 prospects. Ultimately, Aiden Hutchinson surged ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau, and then you also have Evan Neal on the outside. Was he number 1 or number 2 at that tackle position? Obviously, Ike Ekwonu ended up getting drafted number 6, Evan Neal number 7. With Kayvon Thibodeau, you team him with Azeez Ojulari on the outside. Look, they needed to get some pass rush help. You only have Leonard Williams there at the defensive end position to help him out. So I love this pickup. And with Thibodeau, he's not a guy that's going to give you a ton of bend coming off the edge, but explosive with that first step, very heavy-handed, and once he flattens out, he's going to get to the quarterback in a hurry. I love the effort. People said that his motor ran hot and cold. I didn't really see that. I saw a guy who played with a lot of effort. He worked hard to get to the quarterback, chasing down running backs from behind. Loved to see that. The motor just never stopped running. And look, this was a guy who was battling an injury. Everyone forgot about the fact that he had that ankle injury against Fresno State. I don't think he was 100% for much of the season. And then you get Evan Neal at 7. You have to keep Daniel Jones upright. Daniel Jones, you've already declined the 5th year. If he does not pan out this season, then ultimately you're targeting a quarterback in a quarterback-friendly 2023 draft. And with Evan Neal, though, played left tackle this past season for Bama, but his best tape was at right tackle. You put him opposite Andrew Thomas. You have 2 first-round bookend tackles for Daniel Jones. Keep him in the pocket and see what happens. Round 2, they end up taking Wandale Moore, the receiver out of Kentucky. And this pick, it wasn't a bad pick per se, because, look, this is a guy who had 1,300 yards receiving for Kentucky after transferring from Nebraska. But it's just a curious pick because you still have Kadarius Toney on the roster, and it feels like Wandale Moore is a lot like Kadarius Toney. You also have Sterling Shepard, Richie James on the roster as well, so it just feels like a lot of the same guy on this roster. You have Kenny Golladay, who's a bigger receiver, and Darius Slayton is kind of a bigger vertical threat. But you have a lot of these smaller guys, dynamic playmakers, but again, they're smaller receivers, and I thought Wandale Moore was probably going to come off the board really on, in the 3rd round at some point. So that was kind of a surprise for me. And when you look at Wandale Moore, you're talking about 6 wide receivers taken in round number 1, and then Wandale Moore with that 11th pick in round number 2 was wide receiver number 8. So that was ahead of John Mechie, Tyquan Thornton, George Pickens, Alec Pierce, Sky Moore. Really shocked that he was the guy that they called. If you're looking for a guy that was going to be a vertical threat, I thought they were going to go after John Mechie. George Pickens, is similar to what you have there with Kenny Golladay, but Sky Moore I thought would have been a better selection as well. So really a curious pick there for me, just because of the value and just the fit. I know that they're trying to get rid of Kadarius Toney, so just kind of an interesting selection there. You continue that with Joseph Azudu out of North Carolina, a big physical guard. Look, he's 6'4", 308, but again, the value, I had him coming off the board middle of day number 3, so another head scratcher there. But this is a guy who's going to end up battling Shane Lemieux and Mark Lewinsky for a starting spot. What's interesting is his teammate, the other guard, Marcus McKeithen, taken in round number 5. I thought this was going to be a guy who was going to have to really hope that he could get drafted, potentially round number 7 or a priority free agent. But look, I know the Giants need some help there along the interior of that line. Max Garcia was brought in to help there with Glowinski as well. Shane Lemieux really fighting for his life as the starter there at left guard. They brought in John Feliciano to play the center spot. So these 2 guys are going to be depth pieces. They must really have liked what they saw out of the run game there for North Carolina. But again, really a head scratcher for me. Cordell Flott out of LSU, 6'1", 175 pounds. This is a guy who has a pretty high ceiling. I think he has decent ball skills. A sticky type of guy. Only 1 interception in his career there at LSU. But with James Bradbury now being released, you've got Adoree Jackson and Aaron Robinson as your starters. I honestly thought that they should have targeted a corner in round number 2. There were some other guys on the board that they could have targeted earlier. Round 3, look, I knew that they needed to go tight end because Ricky Seals-Jones replacing Evan Ingram wasn't going to move the needle. They got my sleeper and Daniel Bellinger. This is a guy, look, he ran in the 4.6s at the combine, was primarily a blocker for San Diego State, but a guy who watching him when he caught passes in their passing game, and when you saw him at the combine, really a natural pass catcher. I think he's going to be a better receiver in the pros than he was at San Diego State, just basically because he wasn't asked to do it a lot. And that reminds me a lot of George Kittle. And I'm not saying that Daniel Bellinger is near the athlete that George Kittle is, because George Kittle ran a 4.51, but the receiving skills are absolutely there. 31 catches, 357 yards, and 2 touchdowns in his final season there with the Aztecs. And if you talk about George Kittle, what did he do when he came out of Iowa? His final year there with the Hawkeyes, George Kittle, 22 receptions, 314 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So when you look at that, George Kittle came off the board in round number 5, number 146 overall. Daniel Bellinger off the board with the 7th pick in round number 4. I'm not trying to say that he's the next George Kittle by any means, but just trying to draw some parallels there. It feels like this could be the sleeper of the draft at that tight end position. Moving on, Dane Belton, the safety out of Iowa, 6'1", 205, linebacker, safety, combo for them. Reminds me a lot of Amani Hooker. I like that pick for the Giants. They have Julian Love and Xavier McKinney. I think Dane Belton could potentially work his way in there. Micah McFadden in round 5 out of Indiana. A little bit high, there for me at 6'1", 240 pounds. But look, this guy was a leader there for Indiana, a guy that I thought, I think ultimately he could end up sneaking into that starting spot opposite, Blake Martinez. Tate Crowder, Carter Coughlin. What I like about McFadden, look, he picked off 4 passes, 8 pass breakups, a guy that I think does a really good job getting after the quarterback as well, an instinctive guy, sneaky smart, just a little bit high in terms of where they took him off the board, 3rd pick in round number 5, but I'm not going to hate him for that. They take DJ Davidson out of Arizona State, the nose tackle, big physical dude, 6'3", 327 pounds, guy that's going to be a space eater. He'll be the backup for Justin Ellis there at nose tackle. And then in round 6, they get Darian Beavers out of Cincinnati. I'm a big fan of his, 6'4", 237. I thought a lot of Zaven Collins vibes with him. Beavers, look, he and Micah McFadden are going to give some depth there at that inside linebacker position. And with Beavers, you got a guy who can play sideline to sideline. He can get after the quarterback a little bit. He can drop into coverage as well. So I think that's really good value there in round number 6, which takes us to the Philadelphia Eagles. And Philadelphia, look, tremendous job overall for them. Why? Well, they make a trade. They end up getting a number 1 wideout for Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown to team with Devontae Smith, their number 1 pick from a season ago. And so ultimately they trade that 19th overall pick to get A.J. Brown. And I love the ability to go ahead and get this done. Love the pick. So then you look at Jordan Davis there in round 1, number 13 overall. We know the physical specimen that Jordan Davis is, 6'6", 341 pounds, ran in the 4.7s. A guy that people are concerned about his conditioning. When I look at him, you team him up with Fletcher Cox. You want to be able to help that pass rush. Derek Barnett's brought back. You got Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat as well. So really what you're getting is a guy that can hopefully collapse the pocket from within. Very athletic, can chase down ball carriers. I actually like the pick for Philly up front. In round 2, you get Cam Jurgens, a physical, athletic center, a guy who was a converted tight end, 6'3", 303. He's going to be your replacement for Jason Kelsey. Love that. Round 3, you get Nakobe Dean. They need an inside linebacker. You've got TJ Edwards on the roster. You bring in Hassan Reddick. You've got Kaiser White. But Nakobe Dean's the guy, look, very intelligent player. He was an engineering degree and a guy who, made the dean's list over and over again. I believe a 4.0 GPA. Very intelligent guy, and the best blitzer at the linebacker position in all of college football. 5'11", 229. His draft stock dropped him all the way to round 3 because there was that pec strain, and he didn't have surgery on that, and so his draft stock fell. Very, excellent value in round 3, a guy that's going to end up being a team captain for him when it's all said and done. And then day 3, you get Kyron Johnson out of Kansas with the 2nd pick in round number 6. And Kyron Johnson is a guy, he's going to be athletic. He's going to be a guy that's going to be able to get after the quarterback. I thought what he was able to give you, what you saw out of him was some speed, not only speed coming off the edge, but I liked his ability, especially at the Senior Bowl, with being able to get underneath guys and drive people back, playing with leverage despite being undersized. But look, 22 tackles for loss, 12 sacks in his career. I think this is going to be a developmental, situational edge rusher for them. And then in round 6, you get Grant Calcaterra, a guy who I thought was well on his way to being a day 2 pick coming out of Oklahoma. Then he has the concussions. He retires from the game, decides he wants to come back, transfers to SMU, and at 6'4", 241, a guy who can be a really good pass catcher, has excellent hands, a work in progress as a blocker, but I think he is going to be a guy that's going to end up teaming with Dallas Goedert at that tight end position. Good value there with a 20th pick in round number 6. Which takes us to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And look, we knew Pittsburgh was going to end up targeting a quarterback. They brought in Mitchell Trubisky, who we knew was going to be more of a stopgap, a bridge quarterback, if you will. Mason Rudolph already had the audition for that starting spot. We knew he wasn't going to be the long-term answer. And so with Kenny Pickett, what you get is, really they know all about him. He just has to, he played his college ball at Heinz Field, so he just has to turn the other direction and head to the Steelers locker room. But 6'3", 217, an accurate quarterback, very quick processor as well. A lot of people want to beat him up with his inability to play with anticipation. When I saw him throwing the deep ball, I saw him throwing receivers open, especially Jordan Addison, a lot of those deep, those posts that you'd see him run, post corners, and he was really leading that receiver. So I thought there was the ability there. A guy that can make some plays outside the pocket. I think, really he's at his best manipulating the pocket. The problem is he does have a lot of happy feet. That gets him into trouble, and ultimately when that happens, he ends up making some ill-advised throws. Better than average athlete, a guy, everyone remembers the slide, right? I think everybody talks about the QB slide, the fake slide there against Wake Forest in the ACC championship. And look, he's an underrated athlete, ran a 4.7 340 at the combine. Yes, he's got the small hands, but look, he played at Pittsburgh, so if anybody's going to know about things and the weather and being able to play in there, it's obviously going to be the Steelers. Round 2, they get George Pickens out of Georgia. And yes, I know he's battling that ACL injury, but this dude, as a freshman, looked to be a legit first-round receiver, 6'3", 195 pounds. And look, I look at it, and he's going to be your replacement for Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that's a given. And, I think he can be a dynamic guy down the field, tracks the ball really well, high points the football, tremendous athlete. And, he actually surprised me a little bit at the combine with the 40 time. Ended up running a 4.47. That's about where you want to be at 6'3" and 195 pounds. So when I look at Pickens, you're going to team him up with, Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. 3 wide receivers set. George Pickens is going to be a starter right away. Round number 3, they get DeMarvin Leal, a guy at one point we were talking about as a potential top 10 pick. But look, 8 sacks out of that defensive end, defensive tackle position, and a guy who I think could end up being a decent 5 technique at the next level. He's got decent size to him, and 6'4", 283 pounds. But yeah, 8.5 sacks this past season to go along with 12.5 total tackles for loss, 5 pass breakups in his career. So Leal, when you look at that defensive end position, they have Cameron Hayward, they have Stephon Tuitt. They need depth at the position, so DeMarvin Leal, good value in round number 3. Round 4, you get Calvin Austin, the speedy, diminutive receiver, back-to-back 1,000 yards there at Memphis. But, he's 5'8", 170 pounds, ran that 4.3 240 though. And when you look at this receiving core, I mentioned the guys that are starting. Calvin Austin's going to be, a guy that can work out of the slot, get vertical, a nice weapon for whoever's going to be under center, whether it's Trubisky or Pickett. Round 6, you get the fullback, you get, Connor Hayward. You already have Derek Watt on the roster, so I think Connor Hayward's really going to be that guy to be kind of an H-back, be that third tight end in that group. But look, this guy, he's going to the same team as his brother, Cameron, and really showed off his ability to be a blocker, showed excellent hands as well. So I do like this pick. It was towards the end of round number 6. Round 7, they end up going with Mark Robinson out of Ole Miss. This kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I didn't have Mark Robinson on my radar as a guy that was going to get drafted. An undersized linebacker, 5'11", 235 pounds. 92 tackles on the year, a guy who I think is going to end up being a special teams guy for them when it's all said and done. Because just looking at that linebacking group, I don't know exactly where he fits in. May end up battling Ulysses Gilbert for a spot on the roster. And then at the end of round number 7, they end up taking Chris Oladokin out of South Dakota State, 6'2", 195 pounds. Good athlete, a guy that can really extend the plays, a dynamic athlete. So a guy that I think is going to fill out that quarterback room. When you look at it, you've got Trubisky and Pickett, Rudolph. You don't have that Josh Dobbs athletic quarterback there in that room, so you're able to bring in Chris Oladokin to take over that role. Seattle Seahawks sitting at number 9. Were they going to go quarterback? Were they going to potentially take a corner? Ultimately, Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner come off the board at 3 and 4, which pushes the offensive tackles down a little bit. I thought Charles Cross could have been off the board already, but no. He was sitting right there for them. And look, when you have Dwayne Brown not signed, you needed a left tackle, and ultimately they get Charles Cross, who I thought was the best pure pass protector in the draft. 6'5", 307. The awareness is uncanny. His ability to pick up those twists and stunts. So obviously going to be a day one starter at left tackle for them. And then they end up taking Boye Mafe in round number 2. I thought that they needed to get some pass rush help. They did bring in Uchenna Nwosu from USC, but ultimately when you're looking at this group, you don't have Rasheem Green. You need to get another edge rusher. You've got Darrell Taylor. You've got Alton Robinson. Maybe they can catch lightning in a bottle again. And Boye Mafe, who's a freakishly athletic dude, but very raw as a pass rusher. A guy who I think is going to be able to get after the quarterback, quite a bit. 6'4", 261 pounds. I like him playing in space. There's a lot to go around in terms of the pass rush ability. I thought they were going to go corner here. I think that's really a need that Seattle had coming into this draft. So that's really was the pick that I was expecting them to make in round number 2. If they weren't able to go corner in round 1, you've got Trey Brown, Sidney Jones, Artie Burns, DJ Reed's already gone. I think ultimately that was the position to target here, and ultimately that just didn't happen. But good value there getting Boye Mafe in round number 2. I actually had him coming off the board in round 1. They double up. They get another pick in round number 2. Very next pick, they get Ken Walker out of Michigan State, a dude who, he was looking like a guy that was going to be a late round pick coming out of Wake Forest. When you think about it, in his 2 seasons at Wake Forest, ran for 1,158 yards, transfers to Michigan State, and with Mel Tucker there, good Lord, rushes for over 1,600 yards, 18 touchdowns on the year as well. Ended up 6th in the Heisman voting, and suddenly Ken Walker is a second-round pick. And, I think when you look at Seattle, what they want to do, you've got Rashad Penny, Chris Carson, but I think Kenneth Walker gives a different dynamic. A guy who I think people weren't expecting him to run nearly as fast as he did at the Combine. Ran that 4.38 40 at 5'9", 211 pounds. Excellent contact balance, but a guy who also can be a home run threat. So I love the pick there. Round 3, you get your right tackle in Abraham Lucas, a guy who I think is one of the better right tackles in this draft. And with Abraham Lucas, a 4-year starter there at Washington State, 6'6", 316 pounds. He's big, he's long. I think this is a guy who ultimately is going to move in there at that right tackle position. Brandon Shell, a free agent. He's going to battle Jake Curran for that starting spot. And I think when it's all said and done, you're going to have 2 rookie tackles taking on those bookends. So it's going to be interesting there in Seattle. Round 4, they finally get the corner that I was expecting. They actually double up on the corner position. The next 2 picks are corners. They first get the Jim Thorpe Award winner in Kobe Bryant. I found out that he's wearing number 8 in honor of his namesake, the late, great Kobe Bryant. 6'1", 193 pounds. He's an instinctive corner. Does a great job reading those routes in man coverage. Excellent ball skills. The guy that's going to drive on the football well as in coverage. Doesn't have elite speed, but a guy who I think is still pretty darn sticky, and a guy who I think also comes up and run support really well. So I look at Kobe Bryant. I think he's a guy that's going to challenge Trey Brown and Sidney Jones for a starting spot. Then in round 5, they get Tariq Woolen out of UTSA, 6'4", 205. This just felt like the Legion of Boom pick here with Tariq Woolen because of that size. Converted wideout, again, 6'4" and 205 at that cornerback position, which is absolutely scary. Ran a 4.26 40, 42-inch vertical leap. So yeah, you put him out there, that's going to give some really good depth at that cornerback position. So doubling up, not going to hate on that. Then you get Tyreek Smith in round 5, a guy who I thought had an up and down career there at Ohio State. I was expecting him to make that leap and didn't really wow you. He's going to be a guy, we named an awful lot of guys that are going to be those pass rushers, from Taylor to Nwosu to Robinson, Mafe now. Tyreek Smith has his work cut out for him to make this roster. They end up targeting Bo Melton in round 7. They actually go receiver in round 7. With Bo Melton, you have 5'11", 189 pounds. You got DK Metcalf still on the roster. Tyler Lockett. Freddie Swain is your number 3. You've got D. Eskridge as well. Bo Melton's a guy who I think can end up being a speedy, inside receiver for them. Has that gear to take the top off of a defense. Then they end up going to Lenore Ryan and taking Derek Young, a guy who I think has really good size, good speed, a guy that's going to be able to make those contested catches. He's the guy that I could see them stashing away on their practice squad. Which takes us to San Francisco. San Francisco without a first-round pick. So with their second-round pick, they end up taking Drake Jackson out of USC. 6'3", 254 pounds. This was a guy who just was not utilized the way that he should have under Todd Orlando. Todd Orlando had him dropping into coverage way too often, and you saw some of the athleticism with some of the plays that he was still able to make when dropping into coverage. A guy that really has one gear and one move, and that's really kind of just bending and trying to get off the edge. Want to see some of those counter moves built up. When you look at this group, you've got D Ford still on the roster. You've got Nick Bosa, obviously, as your bell cow in terms of the pass rush ability. But, man, you need to get another edge rusher. You have Samson Ekbom. You have Kimoko Toure as well. I think Drake Jackson's going to be a guy that could end up being a situational pass rush right away and then ultimately build his way into pretty darn good pass rusher when it's all said and done with this unit. They get Tyrion Davis-Price out of LSU, 6 foot, 211. This was a curious pick coming off the board in round number 3. I thought this was a guy who was going to be a day 3 pick as well. But look, he's 6 foot, 211 pounds, ran a 4.48 40, which is surprising to me. He actually weighed in at about 232 pounds, so he's actually slimmed down quite a bit. And what I really like is those running backs that do slim down, they get a lot more explosive. It reminds me of Kareem Hunt coming out of Toledo, how he slimmed down and was a lot more explosive. When you look at things, obviously they got Elijah Mitchell in last year's draft. I think Davis-Price, with that size, agility, and that top-end speed, he could be a guy that could end up being that backup. He's going to challenge Jeffrey Wilson. There's also Trey Sermon on the roster as well. So I think this could end up being a sneaky good selection when it's all said and done. Staying in round number 3, they get Danny Gray, a receiver on the outside, 6 foot, 188 pounds. We don't know what the long-term future is going to be for Deebo Samuel there in San Francisco. Are they going to keep him? Or are they going to trade him? You've got Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings. Danny Gray is a track athlete, a guy that's going to get vertical. He's going to blow by some guys. He'll be that vertical threat that this offense desperately needs. Look, Danny Gray, 4.3, 340 at the combine, a 10.59 100-meter guy as well. So that makes a lot of sense, getting that speed up on the outside. Then they address the offensive line up front, getting Spencer Burford in round number 4 out of UTSA. And, again, I thought this was pretty good value, a guy that I thought had a chance to be a day 2 pick. When you look at things, you've got Daniel Brunskill and Aaron Banks at the guard spot. I think Spencer Burford could end up starting in this group when it's all said and done. Can also provide some depth at tackle, but I think his home will be at guard. Samuel Womack, coming out of Toledo, 5'10", 187 pounds. He's small, but he has good speed, excellent ball skills, a guy that could potentially line up in the slot. So you're talking about Emmanuel Mosley as your nickel. Samuel Womack will be his backup when it's all said and done. You get Nick Zakel out of Fordham, the offensive tackle, 6'6", 316 pounds. Athletic, but he really struggled to anchor at the Senior Bowl. That was really the big thing, the big takeaway there. I thought he was a little overwhelmed at times. He's going to have to battle Justin School and Colton McKivitz as the backups for Trent Williams, and Mike McGlinchey may end up being a guy that they end up sliding in on that practice squad when it's all said and done as well. They get Kalia Davis out of UCF up front there in round number 6, 6'1", 302, good size, able to be disruptive in the backfield, a quick penetrator. I think he's a guy that's going to battle Hassan Ridgeway to be that backup for Javon Kinlaw at that nose tackle position. Good depth, good value. as is Tariq Castro Fields at the end of round number 6, 6'1", 197 pounds, physical, quick corner. Inconsistency I think is really the biggest thing that you see with him. That's really what tells me more than anything else. A lot of missed tackles as well. But I think with Castro Fields, you brought in Charvarius Ward. You have Jason Verrett as well that you re-signed. Dante Johnson, Ambry Thomas on the roster. But I think Castro Fields can compete with this group and be a backup in that group. So then you're looking at Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. They're out of Iowa State. Another quarterback, not the best athlete, not the biggest arm, but a guy who was a 4-year starter there at Iowa State. Could come in and be a solid backup for you. You got Trey Lance. You've got Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. I could see Brock Purdy having a long career as a career backup in the NFL. Tampa Bay, trade out of round number 1 ultimately, but I love the picks that they made. They take Logan Hall out of Houston with the first pick in round number 2. They start off day 2 and they get Logan Hall. Look, we don't know ultimately if Ndamukong Suh is going to be coming back or not, but what you do have with Logan Hall is a guy that can come in and take over that spot right away. Even if Ndamukong Suh comes back, I think Logan Hall could battle William Golston, a guy who is explosive. He's position versatile, so if they decided to play any even man fronts, he can move in to the inside and be an interior pass rusher as well. So I love that pick. If you're wondering in terms of the measurables, Logan Hall, 6'5", 6'6", 283 pounds, disruptive, uses his hands very well. Round number 2, they end up targeting a tackle/guard in Luke Gadecki. What I like about him, look, 6'5", 312 pounds, versatile. I think he'll end up replacing Ollie Marpet as the guard opposite Shaq Mason. So another solid pick there on day 2. Then they get Rachaad White out of Arizona State. I had him mocked going to them at one point. This is a guy who is going to probably shoulder some of that load running the football. When you looked at this running back group, you had Leonard Fournette as your bell cow, and then your number 2 after that was Ronald Jones II. He's gone. So I think Rachaad White's going to be a guy that's going to be able to step in there. Giovanni Bernard was more of a pass catcher. And what I do like about Rachaad White, he is more of an upright runner, one cut and go ability, but I love that his ability to go the distance on any given play. He's a very patient runner, looks for that hole and gets north and south in a hurry. Excellent job there at the Senior Bowl, and then really that pre-draft process, he started to move up draft boards. I thought he ultimately was going to be a 4th-round pick. I love him coming off the board in round 3 and going to Tampa. Ran that 4.48 40, 38-inch vertical leap at the combine. So Rachaad White ends up being the backup there, and I really think that's a great pickup. Round 4, they get a tight end. I think they needed to get a tight end, and Cade Otton out of Washington is a good receiver, also a decent blocker. Really good value there, the first pick in round number 4. He'll be the backup there for Cameron Brate. When you think about it, what's happening with Rob Gronkowski? Is he back? Is he not? O.J. Howard's gone, so you needed to target a tight end. This was good value. Round 4, you get Jake Camarda out of Georgia. This dude he boots cannons. He's got a cannon for a leg. He's going to be your kickoff specialist as well. I think he comes in, takes the job away from Bradley Pinion. He'll be your starting punter. Round 4 might be a little bit high to take a punter, but at the end of the day, I thought that was the right pick for them. Round 5, you get Zion McCollum out of Sam Houston. Ball skills. 13 interceptions and 54 passes defended at Sam Houston. And when you look at him, look, he's 6'2", 199 pounds, and at the combine, he showed off some incredible athleticism. Ran a 4.33 40 for a guy that size. 39.5-inch vertical leap. 10 tackles for loss in his career as well, so he's not afraid to come downhill and mix it up. When I'm looking at things, he can end up being a corner and be a backup there for Carlton Davis. Could also push Jamel Dean for playing time as well. So I love that pick. Could even move in and play that safety position in a pinch if you needed him to. So I love the versatility. Excellent pick. He's one of my favorite players in this entire draft. In round 6, they end up going Keeft out of Minnesota, 6'5", 265. This is a blocker, a blocking tight end. Not going to be much of a threat in the passing game. He'll be your third tight end and be more of that blocking tight end when it's all said and done. Could even move into the backfield as a fullback if you needed to add some beef up front. And then Andre Anthony out of LSU, 6'4", 251. Had a season-ending injury. Really, this is more of a potential more than anything else. He's got good length, good speed coming off the edge as an edge rusher. This is all going to be about potential. I think they're trying to capture lightning in a bottle. You've got Shaquille Barrett. You've got Joe Tryon there on the outside. So they're hoping that Andre Anthony can potentially move into a spot, and help those guys coming off the edge. Tennessee, well, you traded away A.J. Brown, so I think that really told us what they were going to do in round number 1. That 18th overall pick, they end up taking Treylon Burks. They got that pick from the Eagles. They get Treylon Burks out of Arkansas. And look, yes, I know he ran that 4.5, 5.40, but he reminds you a lot of Deebo Samuel because he's a big physical dude at 6'2", 225, looks like a wide receiver. He's going to be a day one starter. We know that. This is a guy that's going to be able to, he'll work out of the slot and catch your slants. He can go vertical, win those 50-50 balls, those contested catches. So when you look at him, I actually really like him paired up with Robert Woods when I'm thinking about things and where he would be his best. Where would his best fit be? I actually really like Tennessee for Treylon Burks. Really a sneaky good pick there in round number 1. Round 2, Tennessee ends up targeting a corner. I thought they did need a corner at some point. And day 2 makes a lot of sense targeting that position. They get Roger McCreary out of Auburn, a guy at one point people were expecting to come off the board in round 1. Tennessee not scared away by the short arms at all, but you have McCreary probably going to be the backup there for Caleb Farley, possibly move into that nickel there and back up Elijah Molden. You got Christian Fulton on the opposite side as well, so he's a nice depth piece there. Round 3, you get Nicholas Petit-Frere, the guy who's played both left and right tackle at Ohio State. You've got Dylan Radins. Is he going to be a guard? Is he going to be a tackle? If Petit-Frere can take over that right tackle spot, that moves Dylan Radins inside to that left guard position. So that's something to keep an eye on. Round 3, they finally go quarterback. Malik Willis finally comes off the board, 6'1", 219 pounds. We know the story there. The guy who has the best arm in the draft, inconsistent, the guy who's likely going to sit behind Ryan Tannehill, really learn things. That's what he needs. He needs to develop a little bit more. But look, Ryan Tannehill, we know that he's not the long-term answer there for Tennessee. He's already starting to get up there in age, but the frustrating thing that you really saw was in the playoffs. We saw him kind of self-destruct there. You're limited. Tennessee is really a quarterback away from really contending there in the AFC. So Malik Willis, he'll be the starter there in Tennessee within a couple of years. Day 3, they end up getting Hassan Haskins, another physical running back. I thought that was what was a little curious there. 6'2", 228 pounds. Thought maybe they'd want to go with another a running back that could offer some versatility, a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. No, they're going with Hassan Haskins, who's just going to be another guy just like Derrick Henry, just pounding you in the mouth. Chigoziem Okonkwo, they're out of Maryland, 6'3", 238 pounds. And this is a guy, look, he was the fastest tight end at the combine, ran a 4.5, 240, 52 catches, 447 yards, and 5 touchdowns. You brought in Austin Hooper. Jess Swaim's also on the roster. But with Chig, this is a guy that you can potentially use as an H-back. You can split him out. You can put him in the slot. Versatile guy. So I like that pick. Kyle Phillips is another guy, great pickup there in round number 5. You needed to get some depth pieces at that wide receiver spot. You got Nick Westbrook, Robert Woods, Treylon Burks now. Kyle Phillips, not the fastest guy by any means, but a guy that just teams had such a hard time covering You saw him there in the All-Star games as well. Really kind of showed out there for sure. Theo Jackson, 6'2", 203, a guy who has some versatility on the back end of the defense. You already have Kevin Byard, Amani Hooker, so I think Theo Jackson's a guy that could potentially come in and battle for a backup job. Final spot in round number 6, they get Chance Campbell out of Ole Miss, 6'2", 232 pounds, a guy who was very athletic, played his college ball there at Maryland before transferring to Ole Miss. Instinctive player, plays pretty fast. He actually ran a much faster 40 time than I thought, at a 4.57, also had a 39.5-inch vertical leap. 109 tackles this past season for the Rebels, 12.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks as well. So when you look at this group, David Long, Zach Cunningham, you've got Monty Rice as well. Chance Campbell will fit in with that group, be a nice depth piece for them. And then finally, the Washington Commanders. You knew they were going to need to get a receiver and target somebody that's going to be able to help out Scary Terry McLaurin and give Carson Wentz another receiving option. They end up, a little bit of a stretch. They're at number 16 overall, but they end up taking Jahan Dotson. 5'11", 178 pounds. This is a guy who has tremendous hands, also dynamic on the outside. Everyone remembers the one-handed catch over Sean Wade against Ohio State along the sideline. That really put his name on the map. But a guy, I think he and Scary Terry are going to give them a nice vertical presence. You add in Curtis Samuel, that's definitely an upgrade there at the receiver position. Round 2, they end up taking Fedarian Mathis, a guy who I think can be an interior pass rusher. You've got a 4-man front now, so you've got Montez Sweat and Chase Young at the defensive end positions. You've got Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. You need to replace Matt Ioannidis, and I think Phil Mathis is going to be able to come in there and be able to do that. And look, Fedarian Mathis, to me, I had him coming off the board in round number 2. And actually I'm going to the Bears because I thought the Bears could use a guy that could potentially replace Akeem Hicks. And when you look at Mathis, some people were surprised. They talk about him just being a run stuffer, but look, 53 tackles, so he's very active. 10.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. And I'll tell you what, when you put on Alabama film, 48 flashes all the time, all day long. So love that pick. His teammate from Bama, Brian Robinson Jr., taking it in round number 3. And the Brian Robinson story is tremendous. A guy that really waited his turn behind a lot of guys that ended up coming on to the NFL. And Brian Robinson really had a tremendous senior season. Put up some really good numbers at Bama. 6'1", 228 pounds. Over 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. Also had 35 receptions. So surprising hands coming out of the backfield. So he kind of is that bigger physical option at the running back position. Ran a 4.53 40, which was surprising for a guy his size. But you already have the likes of Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, smaller backs. You have Jarrett Patterson on the roster as well. Brian Robinson's going to give you a physical presence, a bigger running back. So I love that pick there. Round 4, you get Percy Butler out of Louisiana, 6 foot, 194 pounds. A guy who just he seemed to fly around there at Louisiana. You look at that safety position, you have Cameron Curl and Bobby McCain. Percy Butler will give you some really good depth. I thought that the Commanders could potentially be in consideration for Kyle Hamilton. Ultimately, they traded back and wound up targeting the receiver. Percy Butler's not a bad get, though, there in round number 4. Round 5, Sam Howell falls all the way to round number 5. 6'1", 218 pounds, best deep ball thrower in this draft. Just the touch, the arm strength. He also showed that he didn't have the receiving group and the running backs this past season that he did during his sophomore season, where it was really a huge breakout. Everyone talking about Sam Howell as possibly the first quarterback off the board. More of a runner. And when you look at this receiving group, you've got Carson Wentz, obviously. And really after 1 year in Indy, he's already in Washington, so you worry about the long term there. You have Taylor Heineke filled in very nicely as a he's a backup guy. Sam Howell, could he potentially challenge Carson Wentz, or if Carson Wentz doesn't pan out, can he end up taking over that starting job? That's going to be something to watch out for. Cole Turner in round 5. Look, he's a big 6'7", 249-pound receiver on the outside there. He's a red zone guy. And that's really the biggest thing that they're getting him for. You've got Logan Thomas. You needed another tight end. John Bates is there as well. So Cole Turner, good value in round number 5. Round 7, Chris Paul, athletic guard. He played tackle at Tulsa at 6'4", 323 pounds. I think ultimately Chris Paul is going to end up being a guard. And when you look at the guards that they have, you've got Andrew Norwell and Trey Turner, so you're set as the starters. Wes Schweitzer as a backup. Chris Paul could come in and end up manning one of those backup roles. And when you look at Chris Paul, 4'8", 940 at the combine, so definitely a tremendous athlete. And then round 7, they get Christian Holmes, the corner out of Oklahoma State, 6'1", 205, a guy who can play on the outside. He can also play in the slot a little bit as well. And at that quarterback spot, you've got William Jackson III, Kendall Fuller, there's Danny Johnson, the nickel, Corn Elder. They've got Benjamin St. Just, who they just drafted in the 3rd round a season ago. Thought maybe they'd be in the Derek Stingley running, when Stingley was looked at as a potential back end of the top 10. Could they potentially be in the running there? But at the end of the day, I think they're satisfied with their starters and that starting group. They can wait until round number 7. Christian Holmes provides some of that versatility on the back end of the defense. So that does it for the team review. We've made it through all 32 teams and all 262 selections, which will then take us into episode 3 of the post-draft edition, where we'll go position by position. How many guys were taken at each position? What does that really look like? What were the surprises? And then also, who are the guys that weren't drafted? Some of the surprises there. And who could end up making a roster? And then finally, I'll give you some names at each position to look forward to for the 2023 draft. Guys that you'll have to know when you're watching the 2022 college football season. And these are going to be guys that I will be talking about in episode 1 of the 2023 podcast series. So we've brought this podcast to an end. I hope you've enjoyed the content. We've got one more podcast for the 2022 podcast series. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. And for readyforthedraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your week. And until next time, I am out of here.